It's certainly a pleasure to be back, to see so many familiar faces, and to co-host with our friend and associate Charlie. So on the paper it said this was a wide orbit presentation, but it really is a joint presentation between Wide Orbit and Durham Radio, because we're really talking about Durham's dream and how Wide Orbit played a small part in it. So anyway, it is a case study, and what they did is, as Adam was just saying, at the news station in BC, which is Wave. Uh-oh, I just need to figure out how to use the computer. Which is Wave, thank you very much, 98.3. It was just launched last month over out in Vancouver.
Right.
So, so congratulations on that. And you know, there's no local engineer. You're obviously here, and it's not exactly a quick day trip to Vancouver.
No, it's a bit of a drive when you load all your tools in the car and take a week to get there.
Yep. So therefore, simplicity and reliability were pretty important. And you found that virtualization was the answer. So our friends at Durham, Charlie and our friend Ron, whom I saw back there. Okay, you're gonna like wave your. If we go too far off the camp, you're gonna like wave. I hope. Okay, so you know, they've been a happy Wheatstone and Tieline customer for 15 years. You know, obviously companies with really good products that are well known in the industry have worked well for Durham for a long time. And of course, Durham embraced Hyper-V about a decade ago, and of course, we all know that's Microsoft's Windows on Windows virtualization platform. And Durham adopted Wide Orbit,
Wide Orbit 4.
Wide Orbit 4 in 2017. And you've been running it under Hyper-V since then. And that's, for those who are familiar with the Wide Orbit Automation for Radio system, that's all components, but especially the radio server component, which is the main driver behind a Wide Orbit Automation for Radio version 4 and 5. So your idea, and Ron's idea was, can these products be fused together in kind of a proof of concept manner to help drive down the cost of the Vancouver build-out and the implementation? And can you reach a savings of 50%, was kind of the question. So, you remember and use the clicker here. So, why virtualization? Well, it reduced your hardware spend by leveraging your existing Hyper-V platform that you already had in place for other things. And I'm going to use the word equipment here because, of course, we're all familiar with equipment that you rack in racks. So now you can reduce your spend on that kind of by bolting on Vancouver to Oshawa. For example, on the Wide Orbit side, you already have a Wide Orbit system running in Oshawa that's running the stations there. By simply adding an additional playlist to that Oshawa system, for Vancouver, not only do you have to not buy new hardware, but the overall cost of the Wide Orbit implementation was reduced because there was only need for an additional playlist. And of course, it also puts most of the equipment in Oshawa, where you and Ron are located, and it improves your reliability and your redundancy. So I'm going to turn it over to Charlie now to talk a little bit about this map and what it is.
So this is the current embodiment of Wave 98.3 in Vancouver, otherwise known as CIWV. And you'll see the studio build is a pretty simple build. It's just basically an M4 mic blade for 4 mic inputs that allow it to be processed locally. It has its own virtual mixer in it that can mix local audio content that is generated at the studio. That is connected through a Tieline gateway back to the Oshawa plant. The Oshawa plant has all of the playout. So the radio automation, the radio audio playout is all in Oshawa, and it's all mixed down in Oshawa. There's a confidence feed sent to the studio in Vancouver via the Tieline gateway, and then their audio is brought back and mixed in a final mix that is sent to the transmitter, to our HDs in the GTA, to our stream in Montreal, all sent out of Oshawa. The transmitter site is basically what we're using is a Gates. What is it? The Gates. Yeah, but no, it's not an Interplex. What's the model transmitter? It's a Flexa or Fax. Yeah, Fax. Is it a Fax 2 or Fax 2.5? Fax 2. And we're 1100 watts TPO. There's an Aurora 8IP blade in there to do some, or a processing blade actually in there as well, to do some processing at the transmitter site. We have failover audio, emergency failover audio, which is a third tier failover play out system at the transmitter site. If everything, all the ISPs go off the air. Gee, I wonder if that's ever happened. And of course, the tie-line gateway at the transmitter site. This is the current iteration. In our Oshawa plant, of course, we have our central server, our dual redundant radio servers, which are all virtual machines sitting in our own Oshawa cloud network. And the universal radio client is available at any point, anywhere, to control, voice track, manage the wide orbit system on the fly in real time. One of the coolest parts of this whole build, which we'll see in another slide a little bit further on, is a screen builder app that Richard Sonnemeyer spent endless hours figuring that out and putting it together, where one part of that screen, the first 3 faders, are controlling the faders in Oshawa on the virtual console, the virtual final console, and the other 7 faders are all the local content that are in Vancouver. And it's all on one screen, all available for the jock to use. The interesting part of this is, think about this. When they go to touch a fader on the left-hand side of the screen, for that fader to move, it has to travel 8,000 kilometers. And it works. So that's the current iteration.
And shall we have a look at what it looks like? So here we have an Air Talent with her computers and a microphone. So
that is Tara Jean, our morning show host on Wave 98.3.
So as you can see, she firstly has her is this a cup? Oh, it's a speaker. Oh, it's a volume control. Okay, I'm like, she has her cup and her pen, so she's set.
You built it.
And her sticky notes. So okay.
I didn't go.
Okay. So she got her volume control. As you can see, she's got her internet computer there. She's got her screen builder, which we're going to look at in a second, and then my personal favorite screen here. And we have a close-up here as well. You can see her previewing something. And then, as you mentioned, Mr. Sondermeyer did the screen builder.
You can see the little GS broadcast logo on the bottom right. So yeah, that MCR remote bank is controlling the virtual mixer that's in a blade in Oshawa. That is the final mix before air.
Okay. So one of the questions I asked Charlie was, okay, what kind of challenges did you have? I kind of imagine that, there might have been a bunch of trial and error to get this all going. And it turns out that most of the challenges didn't come from the equipment, but they came from people. So what kind of challenges did you see with the individuals?
Well, first there's the job of selling it to management, that we could actually pull this off. And that's a hard sell, but we were pretty able to convince them of it because, again, we've been doing virtual radio broadcast. All of our radio automation has been virtualized since 2017. And if I remember correctly, the only other group was the college across the street in Texas that had a version 4 before we went live with ours. And I believe that the next spring at NAB, I was showing it off in your booth off my iPhone.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So we've been at this for a while, and so it was very easy for us to prove to our management that we could do this. The next big item was the engineering aspect of it. From a support aspect of the engineering, with currently 95% of all our engineering is all IP based. We're doing everything from our laptops. We took it a few steps further than that. We're closer to 98%. We do have a contract engineer in Vancouver for the on-site emergencies that every brand new station has had to deal with. And he's done a great job. And, but yeah, the engineering aspect of it, Actually, I can get up later in the morning if it's Vancouver time. I kind of like that part. Ron kind of cringes, but I like that part. I'm a night owl anyway. The biggest issue is the talent, getting used to a non-tactile experience, the old faders and consoles. Anybody who's been in radio for any amount of time, it's even if you go back to when I started, when it was the dials on the old McCurdy's. Does anybody remember those? No. Okay. Basically, I started in a radio station that looked like WKRP. But yeah, everybody misses that tactile experience at some point and level, but we get used to it. And we've found that in the last month, they're actually getting very used to this. And the nice thing is that if they do spill their coffee in master control, it doesn't destroy the board. It's just a wipe of a screen. Those of us who have had to replace a board in an emergency actually appreciate that. So that was actually our biggest hurdle, and the benefits are far outweighing the hurdles, the issues.
I'm very glad to hear that. So now we've talked about kind of what the proof of concept has been so far. So now where can it go? Because as you remember seeing in the diagram that we showed a minute ago, there were still some boxes in there, some 1 RU boxes, 2 RU boxes. And so can those be, moved away at some point as well? So, as the world, obviously as we know, as the world moves to containerized software, the remaining hardware components can be embodied in VMs. And I think, Charlie, you believe that most of the remaining hardware boxes can soon be replaced, and that all of the VMs will be Linux. So for example, on the wide orbit side, we've been written in Java. Probably if anyone who's familiar with our system knows that our underlying technology is Java, which is cross-platform. We've historically commercialized it only under Windows. However, now that the world is changing, we're getting to the point where we're ready to commercialize it under Linux, and this is also made possible because of the now introduction of Linux-based drivers from major audio transport manufacturers. And so in version 6, which we demonstrated in AB this year, we'll be running under Linux, or giving you the option to run our platform under Linux, the backend servers, and deploy it via Docker. And so that really unlocks, I believe probably, everyone here is probably pretty familiar with Docker, but if not, it really allows the implementation or the installation of software to be tremendously easier, and brings and dramatically streamlines the upgrade process. And so with these kinds of enhancements, you'll be able to use Linux for all of your Docker containers with your various components or products in it, like Wide Orbit, Wheatstone, I think maybe Davicom, and so on. And then obviously that drives down your cost for operating systems and tremendously reduces the headache of operating system upgrades, which we're all very familiar, of course, with Windows upgrades and the challenges that sometimes go with it. However, there is the possibility of things being in, when everything's in a virtual, in a VM somewhere. What does it look like if you need to get GPIO or something else into and out of the system? And of course, there are many options for this, but one of them that I know that Charlie has found to be useful is the MEXM card from Davicom.
So I've been talking with Davicom since NAB. This idea kind of started really formulating at NAB this year, where everybody was complaining about a chip shortage and the extremely long wait times of getting equipment developed and built and put into installation. And the idea of how much of this can we virtualize started to come about. And when you start talking to, the Wheatstones, the Axias, the Nautels, the Gates, the importer-exporter, the Davicom, your audio processors, how much of this can all be virtualized? How much of it is already written in Linux? How much of it can be containerized and loaded into a virtual machine? And with good, solid VPNs or dedicated connections between sites that you can get from the ISPs now, from the cloud services, how can we actually make this viable and functional in the extremely microsecond, time-sensitive world of broadcast. So, I was talking with the guys at Davicom, and they've agreed that this can be done. This can be containerized. They could actually create a smaller virtual device that's just as powerful. Actually, it can be as powerful as whatever resources you throw at it for memory and processing speed, or multiple processors. There's no limit to what you can change and modify on the fly and combine in a virtual machine. So,
The next slide.
yeah. So I come up with this idea. So there's still a blade at the studio. And actually, we could actually have another one, another balloon that I thought about after Deb worked so hard on this, is it could be an iPhone or an iPad with a 48 kilohertz mic could probably do the same thing. But studio, simply a blade, a touchscreen computer for your virtual console, your radio automation, headphone, mic. That's it. You could put it in a box and send it to them. Transmitter. If you're going HD radio and you're combining it all in a complete digital package going to the studio from the importer-exporter, what else do you need besides the transmitter, the cable to the antenna, and the antenna? Maybe some GPIO, maybe put a Mexim card in there. That's pretty much it. Everything else would be cloud-based. All of your wide orbit, your audio codecs, a SIP server to send and to receive phone calls, put callers on the air. Your virtual console is actually sitting in there as well. It can be mixed down. It can have all the fun and features of a fully functional console with bus minus. Your version 4 blades, the Wheatstone blades, for example, or the new Axia nodes, that can all be virtualized. They're all Linux-based. And I know Darren's not here, but I know the guys from Ron Paley Broadcast and GS Broadcast can, they've seen some of the Gen 4 stuff, I believe, right? Yeah, okay. It can be virtualized. It is a Linux platform. And at NAB, that was the discussion we had, because before they had a working model for the floor, they had it virtualized in the lab so they could play with it and test it. All of your audio processing, your importer-exporter can be virtualized. It's a virtual machine, containerize it, putting it in the VM. Even your logger and your Davicom. And if you can think of something else, it can probably be virtualized. It's probably already a Linux device sitting in your rack now. The Sage NDEC is a Linux device. It could be integrated into this. So the possibilities start to become endless as to cloud computing, cloud delivery of radio from end to end, from anywhere. And if you're looking at, and we're going to talk about ISP and reliability and network security tomorrow. Tune in tomorrow. So the idea of live migrating this virtual server, this virtual radio network, all in one box, live migrating it to various ISPs, various cloud servers, whether they be Rogers, Bell, Amazon, your own. It could all be done in live time with live failover.
One of the things you mentioned is that you have redundant internet connections between Oshawa and Vancouver. Could you tell us about that, please?
Well, we are currently installing that redundant. We actually started broadcasting before we had everything actually connected. We actually were running it off of a rocket hub, a Rogers rocket hub at one point in time, both at the transmitter and at the studio. So we can actually do this with the minimal of network connection. And it was just because, dealing with ISPs and commercial fiber installs, it takes some time, and we were a little behind the ball. But yes, you can have redundant network connections coming in, and we are going to have 2 different ISPs at each site.
Do you have a time frame when you think that you might move to the next embodiment?
I think that we're going to have the next embodiment as a proof of concept to test in real world within a year.
Do you know which? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's just getting all of those parts and pieces properly containerized on a bench in a virtual machine and seeing what we can do and make sure it all ties together. So this is the concept. The concept has not been proven, but we have proven parts of that concept all over our existing plants. So I think we can have a working concept within a year, and then we can start actually deploying that as the next iteration of our automation software throughout our platform, and even be able to host other radio stations and support them in their needs. This is where the advantages from engineering perspective is to, with good programmed AI, like with using Davicom and et cetera, we could actually be very comfortably running multiple radio stations from your beach villa in Jamaica.
Which is where our workload allows us to spend so much time these days. And so one of the things I was also going to add is that, of course, it goes without saying this offers a great deal of portability. For example, I drew over here some additional wide orbit components, which are, the universal radio client, that's the desktop application, AFR Mobile, which is the mobile application, allowing you to run any of your stations that are housed inside of this infrastructure from anywhere. And so it obviously allows someone from Oshawa, for example, to do a show on the Vancouver station, or conversely, someone in Vancouver doing a show in Oshawa.
Yep.
And of course, we have other customers here in Canada doing something very similar. So it really does, I think we all can see the benefit of how it permits mobility. And it's exciting to see that in the case of Durham, it's being leveraged to the benefit.
Actually, one of our midday host on the Wave was also the morning show host on the first iteration of the Wave, Vicky Van Dyke, who's also a jazz musician and singer, and quite well known in the jazz circles. And she is our midday host on Wave 98.3. And she is actually in Vancouver this weekend, along with all of our management team for the launch party, which they're hosting this weekend, tomorrow night, actually.
You were not invited to?
Well, apparently there was only so much room in the minibus. But she voice tracks her show using the client from the Bruce Peninsula where her cottage is, and she does it on a Rogers Rocket Hub.
These Rocket Hubs sound amazing.
They're actually crap, in my opinion, but that's besides the point.
Oh, no. So, very well.
Rogers networks actually work.
No.
It depends on what Friday they decide to do a Windows update.
I love my Rogers friends, so it's all good. So very well. So all right. So thank you. Did you have any other points around that?
As much as I bash Rogers, one of the vice presidents of the Network Operations Center has talked about this with me and has offered the Rogers NOC free of charge for us to do whatever testing we want to do. So I can't bash them too hard.
Fair enough. So, all right. Well, thank you for that. So one of the other things that we kind of talked about, of course, is I don't believe that anyone in this room is not aware that radio engineers are harder to find today than they were in yesteryear. And we also know that if you've got something in a rack, you need someone nearby to maintain it so that if it stops working. And of course, I think we all can appreciate that if you put things in virtual machines, that this gets a little easier because for 2 reasons. One is you can get your telemetry from anywhere. You can control it from more or less anywhere. And there's not a physical box that someone nearby needs to go look at or fix or reboot or whatever. And so one of the, of course, as Charlie was just alluding, one of the good advantages of an undertaking like this is that because we all need more work, an engineer can manage more from wherever they are. And one of the points that you made is that there's a monthly visit that's required by ISED, ISED, and that doesn't necessarily have to be done by an engineer. In fact, one of the things that you said is that you know of broadcasters who are training non-engineers to go do the things that are required, like cutting the grass and making sure that things are in order.
Well, you look at our transmitters today, that, you know, most of our transmitters today are fully remotely accessible. You're not needing to do monthly readings because you're getting daily readings or real-time readings on a constant basis that can be logged on the site and logged off-site. So if we need to do readings for ISED requirement, then we don't need to really send somebody that knows how to do those readings when we can get those readings and digest them into a legible and complete report that we can send to anywhere we need using Davicom, the technology built within the transmitters and the equipment at the transmitter sites. And also, that can be, most of that can be cloud-based as well. So I'm not trying to create more work for an engineer. I'm trying to create less work for an engineer to work smarter. That's the idea I have. I'm not trying to get rid of engineers in the industry. God, I've been one of them for a long time, and I'd kind of like to see everybody stick around and I'll still have conferences for the next 50 years. But the numbers are just not there. So let's make it interesting. Let's change the industry a bit. And if it means turning the industry a little bit on its head, maybe that's something we need to do to, one, make it more attractive for younger people to get into, and two, make it manageable. I'll give you an example. We were approached at the CCBE by, if I'm going to get this correct, the Canadian Association of Community and Campus Radio Stations, or somewhere to that effect. And if you include all of those stations and stations in Quebec, I counted up about 172 community and campus radio stations and French service stations in small communities across Canada, of which over 100 do not have an engineer. And they're screaming for it. They need us. How do we solve that problem? Because that monthly visit isn't happening. They're literally falling in great disrepair. They have no idea what they're doing. They're scared of going to the sites because they don't understand them or the dangers. Let's look at changing that whole platform, making it friendly for these guys to be able to do it, whether it be contracting to station groups like Durham Radio or any other group that wants to get involved in this kind of a platform where you're helping support those local community radio stations. There's enough revenue for everybody in this industry when it comes to these local community stations. We're not spending our money in those small communities to help, you know, build them up and have that local content, and you can't get any more local content than some of these community radio stations. Let's help them out. This is a great opportunity for us to expand engineering, make it more relevant and more approachable. So this was kind of my idea. It's expanding the role of the engineer, but reducing the workload of the engineer. Letting AI make a lot of the decisions that we make on a daily basis. Letting AI search through the network of what we're doing and the virtual machines of what we're doing and find the problems. There are algorithms to do that.
Do you think we have that today?
I think we have the capacity to get them today, yes. I think we have the capacity. There's tons of kids that are working at Google and Amazon and everywhere else that are probably bored at what they're doing and would love to do something that has a little more tactile to it.
Understood. Like our friends in Vancouver.
Exactly.
So awesome. So awesome. Well, thank you very much, Charlie. It's definitely interesting to see what you're doing, and I'm glad to see that it's kind of working out really well.